For over 2 years, my daughter-in-law claimed my son was overseas for work. Then, one morning at the farmer's market, a delivery guy suddenly handed me a package. "Are you Matthew's mother? This is yours now. Open it when you are alone." What was inside that package made my blood boil. It was a Thursday. I remember because Thursdays are when I head down to the downtown farmer's market to buy my vegetables for the week. I was carrying my brown canvas tote, the exact same one I had been using for 15 years, and I had just haggled the price down to $3 for a pound of tomatoes when I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned around and saw a young guy, no older than 25 years old, wearing a courier uniform and holding a medium-sized box in his hands. He was sweating, looking like he had run to catch up with me. "Mrs. Martha Davis?" he asked, practically out of breath. "Yes, that is me," I replied, feeling confused. Nobody ever sent me packages. My kids never sent me anything, much less since Matthew was supposedly living in Dubai. The young man held out the box to me. It was plain brown cardboard, sealed with clear packing tape, and felt pretty light. "Are you Matthew Davis's mother?" My heart skipped a beat. "Yes, he is my son." "Why? Did something happen to him?" My hands started to shake. "I do not know, ma'am. They just told me to hand it to you and tell you to open it when you are alone." He shoved the box into my hands, and before I could even ask who sent it, he had already vanished into the thick crowd of the market. I stood right there, holding that box like it was a ticking time bomb. People were pushing past me, shouting out prices and bargaining, but I could not hear a thing. I only felt the weight of that box and an ice-cold fear running down my spine. If this confession is touching your heart, please like and subscribe to the channel to keep joining me for real-life stories like this one. Because what I discovered that day changed absolutely everything. I practically ran back to my apartment. I dumped the vegetables onto the kitchen table and locked myself in my bedroom. My hands were shaking so badly that it took me 3 tries to rip through the packing tape. When I finally got the box open, the world completely stopped. Right there, wrapped in white tissue paper, was the gold watch I had gifted Matthew on the day he graduated with his engineering degree. A Seiko watch with a gold dial that set me back $800, representing my entire savings for that year. On the back, it was engraved, "For my Matthew with pride, Mom." My eyes instantly filled with tears. Why was Matthew sending this back to me? Why right now? Then I spotted the envelope. It was plain white, crumpled at the corners, and had my name written across the front in my son's messy handwriting. With trembling hands, I pulled out the 2 folded sheets of paper. "Mom, if you are reading this, it means you have already uncovered the truth. Please forgive me for not having the guts to tell you this to your face. I am a coward. I always have been. I never went overseas. There was never a corporate contract in Dubai. There were never any business trips or international opportunities. It was all a lie. A massive lie that Caroline cooked up, and one that I was way too weak to put a stop to. I had to sit down on the edge of my bed because my legs just gave out on me. I read and reread those lines. I never went overseas. 2 years. 2 whole years believing that my son was on the other side of the world building a bright future. 2 years surviving on the table scraps that Caroline would hand me on Matthew's behalf. 2 years sleeping in this cramped 1-bedroom apartment while they lived it up in my house. And it had all been a complete sham. I kept reading, even though every single word felt like a knife to the gut. Mom, Caroline made me choose. She told me that as long as you were hovering around, our marriage was never going to work out, that you were too controlling, that you were smothering me, and that we needed our own space. And like the idiot I am, I bought it. I believed her when she said it would be best if you moved out and lived on your own. I believed her when she fabricated the whole Dubai story so you would not ask too many questions. I believed her when she banned me from FaceTiming you by claiming the internet connection was terrible. But the worst part, Mom, the absolute worst part, is that by the time I finally woke up and smelled the coffee, it was way too late. My vision blurred. I felt something snap inside my chest. Something I had been holding on to for 2 years without even realizing it. I took a deep breath, wiped my tears away with the back of my hand, and forced myself to keep reading. A year ago, Caroline kicked me out of the house. Your house. The house you built with Dad. She threw me out onto the street like I was a total stranger. And ever since then, I have been living all alone in a rundown apartment on the south side of the city. She is still living in your house, Mom. But she is not living there alone. There is somebody else. A guy. The paper crumpled tightly between my fingers. I felt a burning heat rising in my throat, a toxic mix of rage and heartbreak so intense that I had to bite my own lip just to keep from screaming. Caroline, the picture-perfect daughter-in-law, the one who flashed me a fake smile every month when she dropped off those pathetic $300, the one who shoved photos of her glamorous new life in my face while I barely scraped by on a $1,000 Social Security check every month, the woman who sweet-talked me into selling her my house, the home where I raised my kids, where I mourned the passing of my husband, where I kept every single precious memory of my entire life. There she was, living it up in my home with another man, while my own flesh and blood merely survived in total isolation, and I simply settled for the breadcrumbs she tossed my way like spare change. But the letter did not end there. Mom, please forgive me. Forgive me for being a coward. Forgive me for choosing her over you. Forgive me for not having your back when I should have. I am sending you the watch back because it is the only thing of value I have left. And I want you to know that I never, ever stopped thinking about you. If you decide you want to look for me, I live at the Ivory Building, apartment 304, on Elm Street, in the South Side. But I will completely understand if you never want to see my face again. I do not deserve your forgiveness. Your son who failed you, Matthew. I let the letter drop to the floor. The silence inside my bedroom became absolutely deafening. I stared at the gold watch shining on top of my bed cover. That same watch I had given him with so much pride, a symbol of his hard work and all our sacrifices, and right at that moment, I realized something that made my blood run cold. They had not just stolen my house, they had robbed me of 2 years of my life with my son, 2 years I could never get back, 2 years of perfectly orchestrated lies by a woman I had trusted, a woman I had welcomed into my home with open arms, a woman I treated like my own daughter. But Caroline had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Because it is one thing to pull the wool over a mother's eyes, but it is an entirely different ballgame to underestimate her. I could not sleep a wink that night. I sat on the edge of my bed clutching Matthew's watch in my hands, watching the little hands tick away every single second of my insomnia. And as the hours dragged on, my mind drifted back 5 years ago, to the day Caroline Miller first walked into our lives. It was a Sunday in October. Matthew came over for Sunday dinner, flashing a smile I had not seen since he broke things off with Lucy, his college sweetheart. Mom, I want you to meet someone really special, he told me, and his eyes had that specific spark that a mother only sees when her son is head over heels in love. Caroline stood in the doorway wearing a burgundy dress, high heels, and holding a bouquet of white lilies. Mrs. Davis, it is such an honor to finally meet you. Matthew has told me so much about you. Her voice was soft, polite, and absolutely flawless. She hugged me with a warmth that felt totally genuine. She smelled like expensive perfume, the kind you buy at those high-end department stores downtown. There I was, still wearing my cooking apron with my hands smelling like pot roast, and I felt completely tiny standing next to her. But I liked her. Oh, how wrong I was. During those first few months, Caroline was the daughter-in-law every mother dreams of. She would show up on Sundays with a box of fresh pastries from the nice bakery. She would help me wash the dishes without me even having to ask. She would constantly praise my cooking. Mrs. Davis, nobody makes meatloaf quite like you do. You have got to teach me your secret recipe. Matthew was on cloud 9. And me, I just wanted my boy to be happy. Things shifted subtly after the first year. Caroline started dropping casual comments, almost like she was just thinking out loud. Mrs. Davis, have you ever thought about putting this house on the market? It is awfully big for just one person, and with what it is worth, you could easily buy a gorgeous condo and still have a nice nest egg left over. I just laughed it off. Sell my house? Not in a million years. I raised my kids within these walls. I lived here with Robert before God called him home. This house was my entire life. But Caroline was patient, incredibly patient. The little comments kept coming. Mrs. Davis, keeping up a house this size is a ton of work. At your age, you should be kicking back and relaxing, not stressing out about lawn care and leaky roofs. It is such a shame you have to blow so much cash on maintenance. With that money, you could be taking cruises and really enjoying your retirement. And slowly but surely, without me even realizing it, she started planting the seed of doubt in my mind. When Matthew broke the news that they were tying the knot, I cried tears of joy. My son, a successful engineer, marrying a beautiful, educated woman. What more could I possibly ask for? Caroline cornered me one afternoon while we were alone drinking coffee in my kitchen. Mrs. Davis, I need to confess something to you. Her eyes welled up with perfectly timed tears. Matthew and I want to start a family. We want to give you grandchildren. But we just do not have a place to live. The apartment he is renting is way too cramped. And I come from a modest background. We do not have the savings for a down payment. She gently took my hand. I know this is a huge ask, but would you ever consider selling this house to us? We would pay you the fair market value. And of course, you would live right here with us forever. It would be your home just as much as ours. We would be one big, happy family under the same roof. I looked deep into her eyes. She seemed so sincere, so vulnerable, and I really wanted grandkids. I wanted to see my son put down roots. How much? I asked, feeling a knot twist in my stomach. The appraiser says it is worth $850,000. We would give you that entire amount up front. You could put it in the bank, invest it, and have total financial security for your golden years. $850,000. That was a massive amount of money. More than I had ever seen at one time in my entire life, and I would get to live with them. I would get to babysit my future grandkids. I would be part of their everyday lives. I signed the closing papers 3 weeks later. My attorney, Mr. Foster, tried to warn me. Martha, really think this through. The deed is in your name. This is your life's asset. The second you sign on the dotted line, it legally belongs to them. But I am going to live there with them, I explained to him. He is my son. I trust him completely. Mr. Foster just shook his head, but he kept his mouth shut. The wedding was an absolute spectacle. Caroline wanted a night to remember. And silly me, I wanted to give her exactly what she wanted. I blew $320,000 of the money they had paid me for the house. A fancy country club reception, a catered dinner for 200 guests, a live jazz band, a 5-tier wedding cake, an imported designer gown for the bride. Mrs. Davis, you are an absolute angel. You are the mother I always dreamed of having. Caroline gushed while we were cake tasting at the most expensive bakery in town. Matthew hugged me tight on his wedding day. Thanks for everything, Mom. Thanks for giving us this, and for letting her move into your house. I mean, our house. Our house. Those words sounded so sweet back then. They taste like pure ash in my mouth now. The first 6 months of living together were tolerable. I cooked the meals, kept my bedroom spotless, and tried my best to stay out of their hair. Caroline kept up the polite act, though I definitely noticed she stopped offering to dry the dishes. She stopped bringing over fresh pastries. She stopped asking for my family recipes. Just little red flags that I brushed under the rug. Then came the passive-aggressive hints. Martha, could you maybe cook things a little less spicy? It really upsets my stomach. Martha, do you mind watching TV up in your room? Matthew and I really want to have a movie night. Martha, could you stop inviting your friends over for Thursday card games? They get awfully loud. My own house was slowly shrinking around me, and I was shrinking along with it. One night, I overheard Caroline talking to Matthew in their bedroom. I am not the type to eavesdrop, but the drywall was thin. Babe, we desperately need our own space. Your mom is sweet, but she is literally always here. We have zero privacy. We can never just let our hair down and be ourselves. Caroline, she is my mother. We made a promise she could live with us. I know. But just think about it. Would it not be way better if she had her own cozy little place? A nice apartment nearby. We could pop in and visit her every single weekend. It would be so much healthier for everyone. My heart started racing. But I rationalized it, telling myself, they are newlyweds. It is perfectly normal for them to want some alone time. I never in a million years imagined that conversation was just the tip of the iceberg. Because 3 weeks later, Caroline strolled into the kitchen with a beaming smile and a bombshell that would change everything. Martha, I have the most incredible news. Matthew just got offered a massive corporate contract in Dubai. A 2-year assignment, pulling in $80,000 a year. It is the opportunity of a lifetime. And right there, sitting across from my steaming mug of coffee, she started spinning the biggest web of lies I would ever know. Dubai? I asked. That is so far away. Caroline sat right across from me, grabbing both my hands with that rehearsed gentleness that I now recognize as pure acting. I know this is tough, Martha. Believe me, it breaks my heart too. But this is a chance we simply cannot pass up. With that kind of cash, we could finally have kids and set up a real trust fund for them. You could finally have those grandkids you have been praying for. Matthew shuffled into the kitchen, his leather briefcase still gripped in his hand. He looked exhausted. Mom, I know this is out of the blue, but Caroline is right. The money is too good to turn down. In 2 years, we will fly back, and we can buy investment properties and have total financial freedom. 2 years? My voice came out way weaker than I wanted it to. But what on earth am I supposed to do staying here all by myself? And that is exactly when Caroline reeled me in. Martha, that is actually exactly what we wanted to discuss with you. She hopped up and grabbed a shiny folder she had conveniently left sitting in the living room. Way too conveniently. We have been checking out some options. Look, we found some adorable apartments in a really quiet part of town. There is one unit in particular that we just fell in love with for you. She flipped open the folder and shoved printed photos in my face. It was a drab beige 4-story brick building with tiny windows and black security bars. It is a 2nd-floor walk-up, gets tons of natural light. It is a 2-bedroom, comes with modern appliances, and it is right next to the subway station. And the best part is, the rent is only $650 a month. Rent? That word hit me like a ton of bricks. You want me to go pay rent? It is strictly temporary. Mom, Matthew chimed in a little too quickly. Just while we are overseas, it makes 0 sense for you to be rattling around in this giant house all by yourself. Plus, we really need to lock everything up tight and secure the property. You know how property crime has been creeping up in this neighborhood. But this is my home, I whispered. Caroline squeezed my hands even tighter. It was your home, Martha. It belongs to us now, and we want to protect our investment, to not leave it sitting empty and vulnerable. Just imagine if someone broke in while we were halfway across the globe. We would never forgive ourselves. Matthew dropped down to his knees right in front of me. My own son, my baby boy, staring up at me with those puppy dog eyes that used to melt my heart since the day he was born. Mom, please, you have got to understand. It is only for 24 months. I will swing by your apartment every single time I fly back to the States. I will wire you cash. You will not want for anything. I felt the walls of my own kitchen closing in on me. I wanted to scream no. I wanted to yell that they were kicking me to the curb. But I looked at Matthew. I saw his big dreams, his bright future, and when is your flight? Was the only thing I could manage to choke out. In 3 weeks, Caroline answered, and I could have sworn I saw a flash of pure triumph sparkle in her eyes. But it vanished so fast I figured my mind was just playing tricks on me. Those next 20 days were a complete blur. Caroline helped me box up my life. Or rather, she dictated what made the cut and what got left behind. Martha, this recliner is never going to fit in the new living room. Why do we not just keep it here? You can always plop back down in it when we move back. The very recliner where Robert had gotten down on one knee. This china set is way too massive for just one person. 6 plates should be plenty, right? The fine china my mother had passed down to me, a 12-piece set of authentic French porcelain. The family portraits should probably stay put in the living room. That way the house still looks lived in and not completely abandoned. My photos. The snapshots from my wedding day with Robert. The baby pictures of Matthew. My own parents. Piece by piece, I was leaving fragments of my soul in a house that no longer had my name on the deed. The day the moving truck pulled up, it poured down rain, almost like the heavens knew exactly what was happening. Two guys that Caroline had hired hauled my few meager boxes into the back of a moving van. Everything I had to show for 67 years on this earth fit neatly into 8 cardboard boxes. Matthew wrapped his arms around me on the front porch. "I am so sorry, Mom. I swear we will all be back together before you know it." I could not even choke out a response. There was a lump the size of a golf ball lodged in my throat. That apartment across town was exactly what the brochure promised. Cramped, basic, and totally devoid of character. The stark white walls had damp water stains creeping up the corners. The cheap linoleum floor echoed every time I took a step. The living room window offered a stunning view of a solid brick wall. I sat down on the edge of my mattress that first night and just bawled. I cried for my beautiful home. I cried for my backyard garden where I used to grow fresh basil and mint. I cried for my spacious kitchen where I used to cook Thanksgiving dinner for 20 people. I cried over my own sheer stupidity for signing away the deed. But I wiped my face and told myself, it is only temporary. Matthew will be back on American soil in 2 years. Lord, I was so painfully naive. That first week, my phone buzzed with 3 text messages from Matthew. "Hey, Mom, we landed in Dubai safe and sound. The heat here is absolutely brutal, but the gig is great. How are you holding up at the new place? Do you need me to order you anything? Sorry for not calling. This jet lag is kicking my butt. Love you." The texts were short, cold, entirely lacking my son's usual warmth. I tried calling him on FaceTime 5 different times. Every single time, it went straight to voicemail. Finally, he texted me back. "Mom, the Wi-Fi in this building is absolute garbage. Let's just stick to texting for now, okay?" Caroline popped by for a visit exactly a month after they supposedly left. She rang the buzzer on a Tuesday afternoon, sporting oversized designer sunglasses and a real leather handbag. "Martha, Matthew asked me to swing by," she said, holding out a plain envelope. "He wants to make sure you are taken care of." Tucked inside were $300 in crisp $20 bills. $300? I stared at the cash like it was a bad joke. "Caroline, my Social Security check is only $1,000. With rent eating up $650, that barely leaves me with $350 to buy groceries and keep the lights on for the whole month." "I know, Martha, I know. But Matthew is just getting his footing over there. Setting up an expat life comes with a ton of upfront costs. He will definitely wire you a bigger allowance in a few months." Those few months stretched into 2 agonizing years of the exact same routine. $300. Every single month, like a literal handout, and me, like a complete fool, accepted it with a smile. Caroline always showed up looking fresh off a magazine cover. Perfect manicures, salon-blown hair, draped in high-end brands I could not even pronounce. She would pull out her smartphone and swipe through her photo gallery. "Look, Martha, this is Matthew working hard at the corporate office." The screen showed a blurry guy facing the other way who could have been literally anyone. "Here we are grabbing brunch at this incredibly fancy place called Alfacia. Can you even believe the decor?" She was beaming at a candlelit table, totally alone. There was never a clear shot of Matthew's face. Never a quick video clip. Never a single video call. "You know how camera shy he is, Martha. That is just how he is. A practiced little giggle. But he is looking handsome. He has definitely put on a few pounds from all the rich food." And I would just nod, swallow hard, clutch those $300 in my wrinkled hands. Because I desperately wanted to buy the lie. Because I needed to believe that my boy was doing great, halfway across the globe, building his empire. But the math just was not mathing. A lot of things, honestly. The backgrounds in her photos were always jumping all over the place, sure, but Caroline was wearing the exact same outfit in half of them. Almost like she snapped them all on the same afternoon at different tourist traps. Or worse, like she just downloaded them off the internet. The text messages I got from Matthew were bizarrely robotic and freezing cold. "Hey, Mom, everything is good on my end. How are things with you? The weather is crazy hot. Sending hugs. Sorry I have not texted much. Work is completely draining me." He never texted, "I miss you." He never brought up a shared memory. He never texted, "Remember that time when?" One day I sent him a text. "Honey, I cooked up a batch of your favorite chili today, and it made me think of when you were a little boy and you would eat 3 bowls in one sitting." His reply rolled in 6 hours later. "Sounds delicious, Mom. Stay safe." Sounds delicious, Mom. My Matthew would have typed out 3 long paragraphs reminiscing about that chili. He would have shared a funny story. He would have begged me for the recipe so he could try making it overseas. That was simply not my son typing on the other end. My best friends, Betty and Shirley, picked up on it way before I did. Or maybe I just had my head buried in the sand. "Martha, forgive me for being blunt, but this whole situation smells rotten," Shirley told me one Thursday while we choked down watered-down coffee. "If Matthew is raking in $80,000 a year, that is, what? Almost $7,000 a month? Give or take," I mumbled. "And he is wiring you $300 a month? $3,600 a year? That is barely a drop in the bucket compared to his salary." Shirley stared me dead in the eye. "Where is all that extra cash going? They are putting it in savings for." "For what, Martha?" Betty slammed her coffee mug down harder than she needed to. "That girl struts in here, carrying purses that cost more than 6 months of your rent. She drops $100 on a manicure. She gets her hair blown out every single week. Does that look like somebody who is pinching pennies and saving up?" I had no idea what to say. But the straw that finally broke the camel's back came from the most unlikely source. Mrs. Henderson, the nosy neighbor who lived directly across the street from my old house. I bumped into her at the grocery store 3 weeks before that package arrived. She was lugging her grocery bags and nearly dropped them when she spotted me. "Oh my goodness, Martha Davis, what a surprise to see you in this neck of the woods. You never swing by the old neighborhood anymore, do you?" "No, Mrs. Henderson. I moved across town." I know. Such a crying shame, right? After how beautifully you maintained that yard." She leaned in close, dropping her voice to that hushed whisper gossips use when they are about to spill the tea. "And is your boy still working overseas?" "Yes, in Dubai." Mrs. Henderson scrunched up her face. She glanced left and right. She leaned in even closer. "Oh, honey, I hate to stick my nose where it does not belong, but I never actually saw your son at the airport." My blood ran ice cold. "Excuse me?" "My sister-in-law, Patty. She works out at the international terminal, ringing up magazines at the newsstand. When you told me your boy was flying out to Dubai, I told Patty to keep an eye out for him so she could tell him hello for me. But Patty told me no Matthew Davis ever went through the international security checkpoint that day or that entire month. Maybe your sister-in-law just missed him. Patty sees every single international passenger, Martha, all of them. And she swore on her children's lives that your Matthew never boarded a flight out of the country." The grocery store aisles started spinning around me. Mrs. Henderson kept babbling, but I tuned her completely out. Her words faded into a distant ringing in my ears while my brain tried to process the impossible. Matthew never boarded a plane to Dubai. So where on earth was my son? I skipped dinner that night. I sat right on my mattress with the open box resting in my lap and read Matthew's confession letter again, word for painful word. Every line was a punch to the gut, every admission a twist of the knife, but I desperately needed to make sense of it all. I needed the puzzle pieces to click together, even if the picture they formed was a living nightmare. "Mom," Caroline backed me into a corner and forced me to choose between you and her. I squeezed my eyes shut. I pictured my boy, my Matthew, the little kid who used to hide behind my legs when a dog barked, the young man who sobbed into my shoulder when his father passed away. How did things spiral this out of control? How did one woman break his spirit so completely? I forced myself to read the second page, the part my brain had rejected on the first pass because the shock was just too overwhelming. 6 months after the wedding, Caroline started showing her true colors. Or maybe she was always like that, and I was just wearing rose-colored glasses. It started with minor complaints. "Matthew, your mom is way too involved in our business." "Matthew, your mom meddles in choices that should be ours alone." "Matthew, as long as she is living under this roof, we are never going to be truly independent adults." She drilled it into my head every single night, over and over like a broken record, until I actually started to believe her. Then, she totally fabricated the Dubai job. That corporate position did not even exist, Mom. She pulled the whole thing out of thin air. She made me set up a fake corporate email account and print out forged employment contracts. She coached me on exactly how to act so you would buy the whole charade. If you do not play along, she warned me, I will file for divorce and tell everyone in town you were emotionally abusive. I will drag your name through the mud, ruin your career, take everything. And me? I was a complete coward. I chose to lose you rather than stand up to her. Teardrops splattered onto the paper, smudging the ink on some of the words. But it did not matter. I already knew them by heart. When you packed up and moved across town, I foolishly thought things would settle down. I thought Caroline would finally be happy. I thought we could just be a normal married couple, but things went from bad to worse. She started staying out late all the time. Networking dinners, she claimed. Professional development seminars. Girls' nights out. She would stumble in at 2 or 3 in the morning, reeking of expensive liquor and men's cologne. When I called her out on it, she went absolutely ballistic. She screamed that I was insanely jealous, that I was smothering her exactly the same way you used to smother me. She threatened that if I kept pushing her, she would leave me with nothing. And then I met Bradley. He showed up at the house one evening. Your house, Mom, at 11 o'clock at night. Caroline introduced him as her new business partner for a real estate venture, Bradley Evans. 38 years old, wearing a $3,000 tailored suit, a shiny Rolex, and flashing a shark's grin. They camped out in the living room, supposedly reviewing contracts. They told me to go up to bed, saying it was boring, adult business talk, treating me like I was a toddler past his bedtime. I laid awake, listening to muffled laughter, smooth jazz playing softly, and wine glasses clinking. When I came downstairs the next morning, Bradley was still there, passed out on the couch. Or at least, that is what they expected me to believe. I squeezed the paper so tightly the edges crinkled. Bradley Evans. That name seared itself right into my brain. A total stranger sleeping in my living room, in my own house, while my son was treated like an unwanted pest. Bradley's late-night visits became a regular thing. Twice a week, then 4 times a week. Pretty soon, he was spending more time under that roof than I was. One night, I finally snapped. I got in their faces. I told them this was sick, that I was not a total idiot. Caroline lost her mind. She screamed things at me I never thought I would hear from the woman I married. You are completely useless. You have 0 drive. Your mother ruined you and turned you into a spineless mama's boy. Bradley is more of a man on his worst day than you will ever be in your entire life. Bradley just sat back and chuckled. He poured himself another glass of my bourbon and smirked at me. Take a breath, champ. We all know exactly where you stand in the pecking order. The very next morning, I found all my belongings packed into garbage bags sitting by the front door. Get out, Caroline ordered me. This is not your house anymore. Go live your pathetic loser life as far away from me as possible, and do not even think about making a scene, or I swear to God I will destroy you. I walked out, Mom, with my tail tucked between my legs like a beaten dog, carrying 3 trash bags of clothes and the gold watch you bought me. I used whatever cash I had left to rent a dumpy apartment on the south side. I got a gig delivering food on my motorcycle, the exact same motorcycle you bought me for my 18th birthday. Remember that? You said it would teach me to be independent. The irony is sickening. I had to stop reading. I pushed myself up, marched into the kitchen, and gulped down tap water straight from the faucet because my hands were trembling too violently to hold a glass. My boy, my Matthew, delivering takeout on a motorcycle while that venomous snake lived the high life in my house with her lover. While I barely survived on charity handouts, while we all bought into her flawless Dubai illusion, I walked back to the letter. There was only 1 paragraph left. Caroline is still dropping by to see you, right? Still tossing you spare change, still flashing you pictures of a fantasy life that does not even exist. I know she is, because I tailed her once. I saw you walking out of your apartment building. I saw how frail you looked, how utterly exhausted you seemed. I almost sprinted over to hug you, but my legs would not move. The shame just paralyzed me. Mom, I know I have 0 right to ask for your forgiveness. I know I stood by and let them throw you out of your own home. I let them treat you like a beggar on the street. I abandoned you because I was a gutless coward. But you needed to know the truth. You need to know that Caroline is actively robbing you blind. Not just taking your house, she is stealing your dignity. And just maybe, if you know the whole ugly truth, you can find the strength to do what I never had the guts to do. Confront her. I am living at the Ivory Building, Elm Street, apartment 304, on the south side. Just in case you ever find it in your heart to forgive me. Your son who failed you, Matthew. I let the letter slip from my fingers and stared at the gold watch sitting on my mattress. The hands pointed to 11:30 at night. Outside, it was pouring. Raindrops hammered against my window pane like furious tears. And right then and there, something inside of me finally snapped. It was not a quiet, defeated break. It was not a feeling of resignation. It was something scorching hot, a blazing fire shooting straight up from my gut into my chest. Unadulterated, primal rage. Caroline had stolen my home, drained my bank account, and robbed me of 2 years of my life. But the ultimate sin, the one thing I could never forgive, was that she had taken my son from me. She had manipulated him, humiliated him, completely broken his spirit. And then she had used me as her personal ATM while parading around like royalty in my house with another man. I stood up. I yanked open my nightstand drawer. I pulled out the little notepad where I kept track of my meager grocery budget. And on a blank page, with a shaky but fiercely determined hand, I wrote down, Caroline Miller. Mistake number 1 was underestimating me. Mistake number 2 was messing with my boy. Mistake number 3 was assuming a 67-year-old woman has no fight left in her. I ripped the page out, slapped it right onto my bedroom mirror, and stared myself dead in the eyes. The submissive Martha, who blindly signed away her house out of love, was dead and gone. The woman staring back was a furious American mother on the warpath. And let me tell you, Caroline, there is nothing on God's green earth more dangerous than that. I woke up the next morning driven by a fierce sense of purpose I had not felt in over 2 years. It was not a feeling of hope. It was colder, highly calculated, pure determination. My gut reaction was to grab my cell phone and dial Matthew's number, to scream at him, demand answers, to march right up to my old front door and cause a massive scene with Caroline in front of all the neighbors, to drag her by her perfectly styled hair, chunk by chunk. But I stopped myself, because women like Caroline are master manipulators who know exactly how to flip the script. They know how to play the victim card. They know how to weaponize your own anger against you. And I had watched enough true crime shows to know that acting on impulse only gives the bad guy the upper hand. No. If I was going to take this woman down, I needed hard evidence. I needed heavy artillery. I had to become something I had never been before, a private investigator. I pulled an old spiral notebook out of my drawer. On the very first page, I wrote the word plan in bold letters. And right below it, with handwriting that started out shaky but grew firmer with every single word, 1. Track down Matthew. Confirm he is alive and see where he is actually staying. 2. Stake out the house. Figure out exactly who is living under that roof. 3. Gather the receipts, photos, witnesses, paper trails. 4. Only strike when the trap is fully set. I snapped the notebook shut. I grabbed the $300 Caroline had handed me the previous month. Dirty money, but it was going to fund my mission. I walked out the front door with a score to settle. The Ivory Building on Elm Street was impossible to miss. It was a depressing mustard yellow 5-story brick building, with cramped fire escapes doubling as laundry lines and dead potted plants scattered everywhere. A far cry from a luxury expat lifestyle in Dubai. I posted up on the opposite street corner, pretending to scroll through my phone. My heart was pounding so hard against my ribs, I could feel my pulse throbbing in my temples. What if Matthew was not actually in there? What if the letter was just another twisted lie? And then, I saw him. He dragged himself out of the lobby doors at 10:30 in the morning. He was wearing faded, ripped jeans, a wrinkled white t-shirt, and a beat-up baseball cap. He had a motorcycle helmet tucked under his arm. I almost screamed his name. I almost bolted across the street to throw my arms around him. But my feet stayed glued to the concrete, because that man was not my Matthew. I mean, it was him, but he was completely shattered. He was bone-thin, with dark, sunken circles under his eyes that I could spot from across a busy intersection. His shoulders were slumped forward like he was carrying the weight of the entire world. He kept his eyes glued to the pavement, walking with that heavy aura of defeat you only see in men who have completely thrown in the towel. The tears burned the corners of my eyes, but I swallowed them down. Now was not the time to fall apart. I tailed him. I kept my distance, ducking behind newspaper stands, mothers pushing strollers, street lamps. I felt totally ridiculous, a 67-year-old woman playing spy games in broad daylight. But it worked. Matthew trudged 3 blocks down to a tiny, cracked asphalt lot where a bunch of motorbikes were parked. He fished a set of keys out of his pocket. He unlocked a bright red moped plastered with a food delivery app logo. The exact same moped I bought him on an installment plan for his 18th birthday. The one I worked 2 part-time jobs for 12 months just to pay off. He strapped on his helmet, kicked the engine to life, and zipped off. I just stood there on the sidewalk, watching my son disappear into the heavy downtown traffic to deliver burgers and tacos to total strangers. The son I put through a 4-year university, the engineer who graduated at the top of his class, the bright-eyed kid who swore he would always make me proud, reduced to scraping the bottom of the barrel because a monster in designer heels chewed him up and spit him out. I dragged myself back to my apartment on shaky legs, but I did not shed a single tear. Not anymore. Crying was a luxury I could no longer afford. I needed to strategize. That night, I picked up the phone and dialed Betty. "Betty, I need a huge favor, and I mean a big one." Betty showed up at my door with Shirley less than 20 minutes later. I laid it all out for them, the anonymous package, the confession letter, the imaginary Dubai job, Matthew hauling takeout on his moped, and Caroline shacked up in my house with a strange man. Betty grabbed both my hands. "Martha, honey, we need to march straight to the police station. This is grand larceny." "Not yet," I replied, honestly shocking myself with how steady my voice sounded. "First, I need to see with my own 2 eyes what the hell is going on inside that house. Who is this Bradley guy? What exactly are they doing?" Shirley frowned. "And how exactly do you plan on getting past the front door?" "Caroline would spot you from a mile away." That is exactly when the light bulb went off. I am not going to march up to that door alone. All 3 of us are going, disguised as door-to-door saleswomen. Betty burst out laughing. "Saleswomen? Selling what?" "Makeup, cleaning supplies, vacuums, who cares? People always crack the door open for sales reps, especially 3 harmless old ladies." A bitter smile spread across my face. "Nobody ever suspects 3 little old ladies." Shirley shook her head, but she was grinning ear to ear. "Have you lost your damn mind, Martha?" "No, I am just done playing the victim." 2 days later, on a Tuesday right around 11 in the morning, Betty, Shirley, and I strolled down my old suburban street. Betty was hauling a plastic bin full of cheap, all-purpose cleaners she grabbed at the dollar store. Shirley was clutching a fake binder full of skincare products we printed out at the local library. I had a clipboard and a ballpoint pen. We were all dressed in drab cardigans and modest slacks. We looked exactly like what we were pretending to be, desperate saleswomen trying to hustle a few bucks. My heart was hammering against my ribcage when we finally stopped in front of my property. My home, the brick walls I had painted by hand, the flower beds I had tended for 3 decades, the heavy oak front door that Robert and I hung together on a sunny afternoon in May. Shirley pressed the doorbell. We waited. 30 seconds that stretched out into 30 years. The heavy oak door swung open, and there stood Caroline. But this was not the flawless, perfectly polished Caroline who dropped by my apartment every month. This Caroline had messy, unbrushed hair. She was wrapped in a champagne-colored silk robe that barely reached her knees. Zero makeup. Barefoot. She smelled like expensive perfume mixed with something far less innocent. "Can I help you?" she asked, dripping with that annoyed, entitled tone rich people use when the hired help interrupts them. I kept my head down, staring at my clipboard. I let Betty do the talking. "Good morning, ma'am. We are local distributors for a brand new line of eco-friendly cleaning supplies. Could we steal just 1 tiny minute of your time to show you our catalog?" Caroline was practically rolling her eyes, getting ready to slam the door, when a man's voice echoed from deep inside the house. "Babe, "Who is at the door?" I froze dead in my tracks. It was a deep, arrogant voice. A voice I had never heard in my life, but one I instantly despised with every fiber of my being. Caroline peeked over her shoulder. "Nobody, Brad. Just some door-to-door salespeople." "Well, tell them to get lost. We are a little tied up right now," the man shouted back. And then he let out a laugh, a deeply intimate, sleazy laugh. Caroline let out a heavy sigh. "Look, ladies, I am really not interested. Have a nice day." And she slammed the door shut. We walked down to the street corner in total silence. The second we rounded the block and the house was out of sight, Shirley exploded. "That son of a bitch is shacked up in there, in your own house." And she did not even have the common decency to look embarrassed. Betty wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "Well, Martha, you saw it with your own eyes. You got your proof. Now can we please go to the cops?" But I just shook my head. Because while we were standing on that front porch, while Caroline was yelling back at that guy she called Brad, while I was listening to that disgusting laugh echoing out of my own living room, my eyes caught something else. Right behind Caroline, in the entryway, I managed to peek at the antique bookshelf where I used to display all the framed family photos. It was completely bare. They had replaced all my memories with some gaudy modern vase I had never seen before. And on the back wall, right where Robert and I's wedding portrait had proudly hung for decades, there was an ugly, soulless, abstract painting. They had erased my entire existence from that house, like I had never even stepped foot in it. Like 30 years of love, sweat, and tears meant absolutely nothing. "We are not going to the cops yet," I said, my voice eerily calm, "because this goes way beyond simple real estate fraud. This is an act of war. And when you go to war, ladies, you better know exactly what you are up against before you pull the trigger." Betty and Shirley stared at me with a mixture of deep concern and total awe. And I knew, right in that exact moment, that the meek, submissive Martha had died on that front porch. The woman who took her place was 1,000,000 times more dangerous. I dropped $800 on a private investigator. $800 pulled straight from my dwindling emergency fund, melting away like ice cubes on a hot sidewalk. But it was worth every single penny. I found Mr. Bernard Owens in the classified section of the local paper. Discreet investigations, family matters, infidelity, corporate fraud. His office was a cramped, stuffy room on the 3rd floor of a rundown commercial building downtown. A cheap metal desk, 2 folding chairs, a dented filing cabinet, and a ceiling fan that squeaked on every rotation. But the second I laid out my story, his eyes lit up with that specific spark guys get when they smell a massive injustice. "Mrs. Davis," he said, jotting down frantic notes on a yellow legal pad. "This is not just a case of an unfaithful spouse. This is a full-blown hostile takeover of your assets. And if what you are telling me checks out, this woman has committed several major felonies. Can you help me nail her? I can get you the receipts, photographs, bank records, character witnesses. But I need 2 straight weeks and $800 up front to cover my retainer." I handed him the stack of cash without a single tremor in my hand. It was half of everything I had left to my name, but I had already crossed the point of no return. I lived in absolute purgatory for those 2 weeks. Every time the phone rang, I jumped out of my skin. Every footstep in the hallway put me on high alert. I lost 7 pounds. I could not sleep. Betty had to practically force-feed me, constantly reminding me, "Martha, you have to keep your strength up for the main event." Caroline paid me her usual visit on the 10th of the month. She waltzed in with her trademark fake smile, fresh coral nail polish, and her little envelope stuffed with $300. "Martha, how have you been?" She kissed my cheek. Her perfume made my stomach churn violently. I had to bite my tongue so hard I almost tasted blood. Play the part, fake the smile, take the charity. "Oh, doing all right, sweetie, just taking it one day at a time." She whipped out her phone to show me the latest batch of lies. Caroline lounging on a yacht. Caroline tanning on a white sand beach. Caroline wearing ridiculously oversized designer shades. Always flying solo. "And how is my Matthew doing?" I asked, sounding like a programmed robot. "Oh, grinding away, but he is loving it. He says they might be able to fly back for a quick visit soon." Liar. You absolute, psychotic liar. The second she walked out my front door, I ran to the bathroom and threw up. Not out of heartbreak. Out of pure, unfiltered disgust. Mr. Owens called me 13 days later. Martha, we need to meet up right now. I hit the jackpot. We met at a busy diner across town. Owens slid into the booth carrying a thick manila folder. He slapped it down on the formica table with a heavy thud. Brace yourself, he warned me. He flipped the folder open, and my entire world blew up in my face. The very first photograph showed Caroline and Bradley Evans strolling into a sleazy motel on the edge of town. She was wearing dark sunglasses. He was in a sharp gray suit. The digital timestamp in the bottom corner read, March 18th, 2023. Exactly 4 months before she walked down the aisle with your son. They were already sleeping together before she even bought the wedding dress, Owens stated, his voice devoid of any emotion. There were more photos, dozens of them. Caroline and Bradley dining at 5-star steakhouses, catching a movie, sneaking out of high-rise condos, making out in a parking garage. The timeline was completely devastating. Every single picture was taken either right before the wedding or while she was actively married to Matthew. This guy, Owens pointed a thick finger at Bradley in a shot where he was stepping out of a black BMW. His name is Bradley Evans, 38 years old. He pitches himself as a high-end real estate developer, but the guy is a professional con artist. He already has 2 active lawsuits against him for real estate fraud. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I felt dizzy. Owens started pulling out legal documents. Now, this is where it gets really juicy. Bradley and Caroline actually crossed paths at a real estate investment seminar 3 whole years ago. That is exactly where they hatched this entire plot. Hatched what plot? The hit job on your son, and on you. Owens spread out a stack of printed papers. They were direct text message transcripts between Caroline and Bradley. Data recovered from a backup hard drive that Owens had magically gotten his hands on. I started reading, and every single word dripped with pure venom. Caroline, I finally talked the old bat into selling the property. Manipulating old ladies is way easier than playing guys lol. Bradley, what is the appraisal at? Caroline, $850K. But the lot itself is worth double that. Gentrification is hitting that block hard. Give it 5 years, and we can easily flip it for $2 million. Bradley, perfect babe. Just put a ring on the idiot. Drain the equity from the mom, wait 2 years, and file for divorce. The deed goes straight to you in the settlement. Caroline, what if the spineless loser refuses to sign the divorce papers? Bradley, you boot him out. You make his daily life a living hell. File a fake domestic abuse claim if you have to. I have sharks for lawyers who owe me massive favors. I had to squeeze my eyes shut. I took a massive breath. I willed myself not to pass out right into my coffee cup. Keep reading, Owens ordered gently. Caroline, the old bag finally moved into the dump across town. I toss her $300 a month to keep her quiet. She genuinely thinks Matthew is working out in Dubai, lol. Bradley, you are a straight-up psychopath. It is such a turn-on. Caroline, I finally kicked Matthew to the curb. He cried like a little girl. Totally pathetic. Bradley, what if he grows a spine? What if he blabs to the cops? Caroline, he will not say a word. He is a total coward. Plus, I have him completely by the balls. Owen slid another piece of paper across the table. This is the nail in the coffin, Martha. It was a bank loan agreement. A massive personal line of credit for $45,000, taken out under the name Matthew Davis, signed with his forged signature. Using my house as the primary proof of residence, Caroline took out this loan 8 months ago, Owens explained. She forged your son's signature on the dotted line. She used his old bank statements and utility bills from when he was still living there. The bank rubber-stamped the cash advance because the paperwork looked flawless on the surface. But why on earth did she need a $45,000 loan? Owens flashed a grim smile. Because Bradley is up to his eyeballs in debt. He owes 3 different banks and 2 loan sharks a ton of cash. Caroline used that loan to bail him out. The master plan was incredibly simple. Squeeze every last drop of cash out of your son's credit, take the house free and clear in a brutal divorce settlement, and flip the property in a few years for a massive payout. And what about Matthew? They were going to leave Matthew to rot in the gutter. Saddled with 45 grand in debt he has to pay back. No house, no wife. Completely bankrupted. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. Is this enough evidence to press charges? More than enough. We are looking at wire fraud, forgery, grand larceny. Caroline is looking at hard time in a federal penitentiary. Bradley, too. Owens snapped the folder shut. He stared at me dead serious. But you need to understand something right now, Martha. The legal system is a slow, grueling meat grinder. You are going to have to take the stand. Your son is going to have to take the stand. Every dirty little secret is going to be dragged out into the public eye. Are you ready for that kind of war? I thought about Matthew hauling takeout food in the freezing rain on a moped. I thought about the 2 years they stole from my life. I thought about my beautiful home, my sanctuary, turned into a snake pit. I thought about every calculated lie, every humiliation, every single dollar that wicked woman bled out of me while flashing that pageant smile. Mr. Owens, I said, my voice sounding like it belonged to a completely different person. I am not just ready. I am going to absolutely obliterate her. And right then, I knew exactly what my first move had to be. But first, I had to go see my boy. The ivory building looked even more depressing under the streetlights. The fluorescent bulbs in the hallway flickered ominously. The air reeked of cheap microwave dinners and stale mildew. I hauled myself up the concrete stairs because the elevator had a piece of cardboard taped to it that read out of order in black Sharpie. 3rd floor, apartment 304. I stood frozen in front of the door, with my fist raised, terrified to knock. What was I supposed to say? Hey, son? I got your confession package? I read all about how they destroyed you while you just rolled over and took it? How you were hauling tacos while I ate canned beans to survive? No, none of that would do any good. I knocked 3 times. Softly. I heard shoes shuffling across the floorboards. Something clattered to the floor inside. Someone muttered a curse word. The door creaked open, and there stood my son. But dear God, he was a ghost of the man who introduced me to Caroline 5 years ago. Matthew had long, greasy hair, a ragged beard that had not been trimmed in days, dark bags under his eyes that looked like physical bruises. He was wearing a stained gray t-shirt and ripped sweatpants. He was barefoot. He radiated pure, unadulterated exhaustion. His eyes bugged out of his head when he saw me standing there. Mom? His voice cracked on that single syllable. I did not say a word. I just pushed past him gently, stepped inside, and clicked the door shut behind me. The apartment was practically a cave. One single room that pulled triple duty as a living space, a kitchen, and a bedroom. A bare mattress tossed on the floor in a sea of tangled sheets. A cheap hot plate on a rusty counter. An ancient refrigerator that hummed like a dying lawnmower. Cardboard moving boxes doubling as furniture. Dirty clothes strewn everywhere. Crusty plates piled high in the sink. My 32-year-old son was living in worse squalor than a broke college freshman. Mom, Matthew ran his hands through his greasy hair. I was not expecting. How did you even figure out where? And then he noticed I was clutching the letter in my hand. Oh, the package. Yeah, the package. My tone came out way harsher than I intended. Matthew collapsed onto his floor mattress. He buried his face in his hands. I should have known you would open it. I should have. God, Mom, I wanted to break the news to you differently. Differently how, Matthew? By waiting another 2 years? 5 years? By waiting until I was dead and buried, still believing my successful son was out in Dubai. He snapped his head up. Tears were already streaming down his cheeks. I was terrified. I was terrified you would hate me. I was terrified you would never be able to forgive me. I lowered myself onto the mattress right next to him. I could feel the broken metal springs stabbing me in the back. Start talking, and do not leave out a single detail. So Matthew started talking. He broke down exactly how Caroline had targeted him with perfectly engineered affection, how she did a deep dive into our family history before she ever even accidentally bumped into him, how she knew right off the bat that I owned that house free and clear, that it was sitting on prime real estate, and that it was my only financial safety net. She made me feel like I hung the moon, Mom, he confessed, his voice breaking. After Lucy dumped me, after going through so much rejection, Caroline made me feel like I was the most important guy on the planet. She fed me exactly what my ego needed to hear. My blood boiled when he detailed how the subtle digs at me started. Your mom relies on you way too much. It is sweet, but it is super toxic. Your mom still treats you like you are in high school. As long as you let her cast a shadow over you, you will never be the man of the house. And I bought it hook, line, and sinker, Mom. I swallowed every drop of poison because deep down, my own pride wanted to believe it. I wanted to prove I was totally independent. I wanted to prove I was man enough to run my own household. My ears were ringing when he admitted how Caroline strong-armed him into asking for the deed. She convinced me that pushing you to sell the house was the only way you would ever respect me as a peer. She swore that if I kept crashing in my childhood bedroom, I would forever just be your little boy. She twisted the narrative so much that she actually made me believe buying the house and letting you live in the guest room was the ultimate way to honor you and give you financial security. $850,000, I muttered under my breath. Money I blew on your extravagant wedding, on cash loans you never paid back, on trying not to starve while the two of you lived like royalty. Matthew buried his face in his hands again. I know, and I hate myself every single day for it. I took a deep breath to steady myself. And the Dubai job? It never existed. It was a complete phantom. Caroline cooked the whole thing up in her head. She mocked up bogus corporate contracts in Photoshop. She registered a fake domain name for the email addresses. She literally directed me like an actor on a movie set, so I would feed you all the right lines. He let out a hollow, bitter laugh. She even stood behind me while I practiced in the bathroom mirror, making sure my facial expressions looked convincing enough when I broke the news to you. But why, Matthew? Why did you go along with it? Why did she threaten you? His voice dropped to a barely audible whisper. She told me that if I did not play ball, if we did not force you out of the house with a bulletproof excuse, she would pack her bags and file for divorce. And that was not all. She threatened to hit me with a restraining order for domestic violence. She promised to obliterate my professional reputation. She swore she would tell everyone in our social circle that I was physically and emotionally abusive. A cold chill ripped through my body. I never laid a finger on her, Mom. I swear on my life. But she made it crystal clear that the truth did not matter. People would immediately take her side over mine. One fake police report, and my engineering license would be revoked. My entire life would go up in smoke. So you decided to let her ruin my life instead. Matthew let out a gut-wrenching sob. It sounded completely raw and animalistic. Yes, and I have to live with that sickening guilt for the rest of my life. He walked me through the first few months after I packed up and left. How Caroline did a complete 180 the second I walked out the front door. She completely stopped cooking. She stopped cleaning the house. She started hitting the clubs every single night and would not drag herself home until the sun came up. She blew through cash on designer clothes, 5-star dinners, and luxury hotels. When he confronted her about where the money was coming from, she lied and said it was her personal savings. But I knew damn well she did not have a dime in savings, so I dug through the bank statements. Matthew stood up, rooted through a cardboard box in the corner, and pulled out a crumpled manila folder. He handed it to me. Inside was a stack of bank records, wire transfers, and massive ATM withdrawals, all tied to a joint account, but packed with transactions he had never authorized. Caroline had full access to my checking account because I handed over the debit card the day we got married. Blind trust, right? He laughed bitterly. She was draining the account dry every week. $1,000 here, $2,000 there. By the time I actually looked at the balance, she had siphoned out $18,000. Good Lord. And when I finally cornered her, when I started screaming, when I threatened to call the cops on her, Bradley casually walked through the front door. The way Matthew spat out that name was laced with so much pure hatred, it actually scared me. Bradley is everything I am not. Tall, built, loaded, totally arrogant. He strutted into our house like his name was on the deed. He poured himself a glass of my scotch. He kicked his feet up on my coffee table, and he looked me dead in the eye and said, "Buddy, Your wife does not want you anymore. Just take it on the chin and walk away with whatever dignity you have left. And Caroline? Caroline just laughed. She walked over, draped her arm around Bradley's neck, and told me, "He is absolutely right, Matthew. This marriage is a joke. I need a real man in my bed, not a pathetic mama's boy." Matthew totally broke down right then and there. He sobbed harder than I had seen him cry since he was 8 years old and wiped out on his bicycle. I threw my arms around him, because even though I was absolutely furious with him, even though he had completely betrayed me, even though he picked that venomous snake over his own mother, he was still my son. He was still my baby boy, and his soul was completely shattered. They literally threw me out that very night, Mom. They shoved all my clothes into black trash bags. Bradley tossed a $50 bill at my feet and sneered, "That should cover the Uber ride," like I was some homeless guy begging for change. We sat there on that filthy mattress, clutching each other and crying for what felt like hours. When we finally pulled apart, I wiped the tears off his face with my thumb, exactly like I did when he was a little boy. "Matthew, look at me." He lifted his bloodshot eyes. "You made some colossal, unforgivable mistakes." I kept my voice rock steady. "But Caroline manipulated you. She used you as a pawn. And then she destroyed you. And I am absolutely not going to sit back and let that happen. It is way too late, Mom. We lost everything." "No." A totally icy smile spread across my face. "We have not lost. Not by a long shot." I whipped out the thick file Mr. Owens had handed me at the diner. I tossed it right onto his lap. "Read this, and then you are going to help me do exactly what you should have done 2 years ago." Matthew flipped open the folder. His eyes darted over the surveillance photos, the text transcripts, the fake bank loans. And suddenly, a look washed over his face that I had not seen in months. Pure, unadulterated fury. For 3 straight days, I did not set foot outside Matthew's apartment. We barely slept, and we ate even less. But we hustled harder than we ever had in our lives. We turned that miserable studio into a literal war room. We taped photographs, bank statements, and timelines all over the peeling wallpaper. We connected the dots with red string like we were detectives in a gritty crime thriller. Every lie, every stolen dollar, every single betrayal. And while we worked, I watched my son slowly snap out of his depression. Mr. Owens knocked on the door on the 3rd day. He trudged up the 3 flights of stairs totally winded, lugging his beat-up leather briefcase and 2 massive paper bags full of takeout burgers. "Figured you two could use some fuel," he grunted, dumping the food onto the only table in the room, an upside-down plastic milk crate. We wolfed down the food in total silence. Once we finished, Owen started pulling fresh documents out of his briefcase. "Martha, Matthew, I have got an update. And honestly, it is way better than I was hoping for." We sat on the edge of the mattress like eager students waiting on a professor. First up, the sale of the property. Owens spread out the original closing documents I had signed. "This contract is riddled with massive legal loopholes. What does that actually mean?" I asked. "It means that when you put your signature on that dotted line, you did it under severe emotional duress and deliberate fraudulent misrepresentation. Caroline explicitly promised that you would reside in the home indefinitely. That condition was never met. Furthermore, he pointed a stubby finger at a tiny paragraph buried in the legalese. Right here, it stipulates that the sale was legally contingent on you maintaining a lifetime right of occupancy. That is a legally binding clause." Matthew leaned forward, his eyes wide. "So Mom still has legal rights to the house?" "Oh, it is way better than that. If we can prove in court that they forced her out using fraudulent pretenses, effectively breaching the core agreement, a judge can void the entire real estate transaction. The deed would legally revert back into your mother's name." I felt my heart skip a massive beat. "But we are going to need rock-solid witnesses," Owens continued. "People who saw them strong-arm her. People who watched them kick her out. People who can testify that they completely violated the agreement. I have got witnesses lined up right now." I shot back instantly. Betty and Shirley were by my side through the whole nightmare. They watched Caroline manipulate me in real time. Bingo. Moving on to point number 2, the adultery. Owen slapped the stack of photos onto the milk crate. Dozens of shots showing Caroline and Bradley all over each other, making out, sneaking into cheap motels. Adultery is highly relevant in at-fault divorce proceedings in this state, especially when it comes to the division of assets. When you have ironclad proof of infidelity, the cheating spouse often forfeits their claim to any assets acquired during the marriage. Matthew went completely pale. Wait, does that mean Caroline could walk away without a single dime from the house? Exactly. The property was technically purchased by the two of you during the marriage, but it was funded by your mother's equity. If we can prove fraud on the initial purchase, plus documented adultery, Caroline walks away with absolute zero. Not a single red cent. I watched Matthew process the information, watching his knuckles turn white as he clenched his fists. Point number 3, and this is the one that brings the hammer down, the fraudulent loan. Owens whipped out the bank contract, the $45,000 line of credit Caroline opened under Matthew's name. This right here is felony forgery, wire fraud, and aggravated identity theft. These are heavy federal charges. Caroline could be looking at serious prison time for pulling this stunt. And what about Bradley? I asked. Bradley accepted those funds to pay off his personal debts. That legally makes him an accessory after the fact. He could end up sharing a cell block. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the tiny apartment. I need you both to understand the gravity of this, Owens said, his voice deadly serious. This is no longer just a civil dispute over a deed. This is about putting two human beings behind bars. This is about completely detonating their lives. Are you absolutely certain you want to cross that line? I looked at Matthew. Matthew looked right back at me. And without a second of hesitation, we both spoke at the exact same time. Yes. Owens gave a curt nod. All right then. I need Matthew to march down to the police precinct and file an official report regarding the fraudulent loan first thing tomorrow morning. That officially kicks off the criminal investigation. Matthew swallowed hard. Am I going to have to face her? Eventually, yes. In a courtroom. But you are not going to be sitting at that table alone. Matthew tossed and turned all night. I could hear him shifting around in the pitch black, his breathing fast and shallow. Around 4 a.m, I sat down next to him on the mattress. Are you terrified? I asked him. I am absolutely paralyzed. So am I. I grabbed his hand and held it tight, but being scared is a good thing. It means our hearts are still beating. It means we still have something worth fighting for. Caroline tried to strip that away from us too, but she failed miserably. Mom, do you think you will ever actually be able to forgive me? I already forgave you, honey, the second I finished reading your letter, because I could see how deeply remorseful you were. I could see you were hurting just as much as I was. I squeezed his hand harder. But right now, I need you to figure out how to forgive yourself. And the only way you are ever going to do that is by standing up and looking that monster in the eye. First thing the next morning, we headed down to the local police precinct. Matthew was clutching the thick folder packed with all the hard evidence of the loan fraud. I walked him right up to the double glass doors. You got this? I asked him. He walked inside. It took him 2 agonizing hours. When he finally walked back out, his eyes were bloodshot, but his posture was straighter than it had been in months. It is done. I officially pressed charges. What did the detectives say? They said that with the paper trail we handed over, they are going to pull Caroline in for questioning. They said a judge will probably sign an arrest warrant. He took a massive, shuddering breath. Mom, I actually did it. I finally did something right. I threw my arms around him right there on the busy sidewalk, totally ignoring the crowds of people rushing past us. The next few days were an absolute whirlwind of chaos. Owens hooked us up with another shark of a lawyer, Mr. Miller, a guy who specialized exclusively in nasty divorces and high-stakes real estate fraud. I handed him a $15,000 retainer out of the $95,000 I had left to my name. Mr. Miller was a 50-year-old bulldog of a man who wore thick-rimmed glasses and possessed zero patience for small talk. He combed through every single document. He sat down and interviewed Betty and Shirley. He drafted up sworn affidavits. Martha, he told me after 3 grueling hours of prep work, your case is rock solid, incredibly solid. But I have to warn you, Caroline is going to fight tooth and nail, and she is going to fight extremely dirty. Let her swing. She does not scare me anymore. Miller cracked a rare smile. I like your style, Martha. We are going to get your house back. In the meantime, we kept digging. And we struck gold. Matthew suddenly remembered that Caroline kept highly sensitive documents locked away in a hidden digital safe bolted inside the walk-in closet of the master bedroom. My old bedroom, the one I shared with Robert for 30 years. I know the passcode, Matthew blurted out. She never bothered to change it because she probably assumes I am too stupid to remember. What exactly is locked in there? I have no idea. But I used to catch her sneaking papers out, reading them over, and locking them back up. She was always super paranoid about it, like whatever was inside was radioactive. We desperately needed those files. But how on earth were we supposed to sneak into the house without triggering an alarm or getting caught? Betty came to the rescue. Martha, do you remember Arthur? The grumpy old guy who lives at house number 402 right across the street from your old place? Arthur was a 75-year-old widower who lived completely alone with 3 fat cats. I used to bake him a batch of cookies every Christmas. He used to water my hydrangeas whenever I went out of town. Of course, I remember Arthur. Well, it turns out Arthur absolutely despises your lovely daughter-in-law. He complains that she throws loud, obnoxious parties with her new boyfriend, that they blast bass-heavy music until 3 in the morning, and that this Bradley character keeps parking his luxury SUV, blocking Arthur's driveway. Arthur is ready to go to war. A crazy, desperate idea started brewing in my head. Betty, do you think Arthur would be willing to keep an eye on the house for us? Like, text us the second Caroline pulls out of the driveway? Betty grinned wickedly. Martha, that grumpy old man would gladly sell his soul to screw over the people keeping him awake at night. Of course he will do it. And just like that, Arthur became our neighborhood watchdog. We sat him down and gave him the full rundown. We did not sugarcoat a single detail. When we finished the story, Arthur slammed his wrinkled fist down on his kitchen table. That woman is an absolute parasite. Ever since she took over your place, this whole block has gone straight to hell. Count me in. Tell me exactly what you need me to do. I need to know exactly what days Caroline and Bradley leave the property, and exactly how long they stay gone. Arthur whipped out a little pocket notebook. I already have their entire schedule memorized because they drive me up the damn wall coming and going. It turned out Arthur was a better private eye than I ever could be. He had 3 months' worth of logs. Caroline and Bradley bolted out of the house every single Tuesday and Thursday, right at 7 in the evening. They never pulled back into the driveway until well after 11. 4 solid hours. They hit up some swanky cocktail lounge downtown every Thursday, Arthur noted. I always see them stumbling out of the Uber totally trashed. Perfect. The very next Thursday, right at 7:30, Matthew and I stood in the shadows just down the street from the property. My property. Arthur had just texted us confirmation. They pulled out 15 minutes ago. You have got a 3-hour window minimum. Matthew pulled his old house keys out of his pocket. The keys Caroline never even bothered to ask him to hand over. She had been too arrogant to even change the deadbolts. We slipped inside. And what we discovered locked inside that safe handed us the ultimate ammunition to blow their lives sky high. Creeping into my own house like a common burglar was easily one of the most surreal, out-of-body experiences of my entire life. Matthew pushed the front door open, and the smell hit my nostrils instantly. It did not smell like my sanctuary anymore. It did not smell like the vanilla candles I used to burn on Sunday afternoons, or the fresh ground coffee I brewed every morning, or the fresh-cut flowers I always kept in the foyer. It smelled like heavy designer cologne, stale liquor, and cigarette smoke. It smelled like complete strangers. We only flicked on one tiny accent lamp. The heavy blackout curtains were drawn tight so nobody on the street could spot our shadows. And then I took a good look at what they had done to my beautiful home. The plush recliner where Robert had proposed, gone, swapped out for an aggressively modern, cream-colored leather sofa that easily cost more than 6 months of my Social Security checks. The sturdy oak dining table, where we hosted 20 loud family Christmases, tossed in the trash, replaced by a cold slab of glass and steel. Every single framed family memory that used to line the hallway, ripped down and swapped for soulless, mass-produced abstract canvases. My kitchen, My gorgeous, warm kitchen, where I spent 3 decades whipping up meals for the people I loved. It was now stuffed with high-tech appliances I did not even recognize. A commercial-grade Italian espresso machine, a ridiculous designer blender, a glowing LED wine rack. But the ultimate slap in the face was the corner of the living room where I used to keep my little prayer altar, the altar with the wooden cross my mother had passed down to me, the candle I had kept faithfully lit for 40 years, wiped completely clean, replaced by a floating glass shelf lined with expensive bottles of imported scotch. "Mom," Matthew's harsh whisper snapped me out of my trance. "We have got to move." We crept up the wooden staircase. Every single step groaned under the weight of 1,000 memories. That was the exact spot Matthew tumbled down when he was 3, bumping his head on the banister. That was the landing where Robert and I would sit and whisper about the bills after the kids were fast asleep. That was the hallway where I collapsed and sobbed the afternoon the oncologist told me my husband's cancer was terminal. The door to the master suite was cracked open. Matthew pushed it wide. I had to bite the inside of my cheek until it bled just to stop myself from screaming. My bedroom, the sacred space where I slept next to the love of my life for 25 years, where I gave birth to my babies, where I knelt and prayed every single night. It was now draped in tacky red satin sheets. Dirty men's and women's clothing littered the expensive hardwood floor. Empty champagne bottles littered the nightstands. The unmistakable stench of sex and betrayal hung thick in the stagnant air. "The safe is tucked in the back of the walk-in," Matthew muttered, his voice tight with anxiety. He slid the mirrored doors open. The closet that used to hold my modest cardigans and sensible shoes was now bursting with designer cocktail dresses, tailored Italian suits, and stilettos that cost more than my monthly rent. Buried all the way in the back, hidden behind a row of heavy winter coats, was a digital steel safe bolted directly into the drywall. A sleek black box with a glowing keypad. Matthew punched in the code. 1508. August 15th. Matthew's birthday. The absolute sickening irony of it all. The heavy steel door popped open with a loud click. Stacked inside was a leather-bound portfolio, thick bricks of cold, hard cash, and a bulging manila envelope. Matthew grabbed everything and dumped it right onto the bed that reeked of Caroline's perfume. We counted the cash first. $12,000 in crisp $100 bills. Money that rightfully belonged to Matthew. Stolen money. Next, we flipped open the leather portfolio. And what we read literally sucked the air right out of my lungs. They were drafted contracts, blueprints. An entire, fully documented criminal conspiracy mapped out with the chilling precision of a cartel boss. The first page was a handwritten business proposal scrawled in Caroline's handwriting. The date at the top, 2 whole months before she ever accidentally bumped into Matthew. The title, Project Acquisition, the Davis Estate. I read the bullet points out loud, my hands shaking violently. Objective, secure ownership of the property located in the suburbs. Current market appraisal, $850,000. Projected 5-year flip value, $2 million. Strategy Phase 1. Initiate relationship with target. Matthew Davis, 32 years old. Profession, engineer. Status, single. Highly emotionally vulnerable following a recent breakup. Phase 2. Secure total trust of the asset holder. Martha Davis, widow, sole legal owner of the property. Phase 3. Fast track marriage timeline. Maximum 18-month runway. Phase 4. Coerce asset holder into legally transferring the deed. Frame as a family investment. Phase 5. Eject the asset holder using a credible, unverified cover story. Fabricate an overseas relocation. Cite a need for marital boundaries. Phase 6. Execute strategic divorce filing after 24 months to trigger a 50-50 asset split under community property laws. Phase 7. Liquidate property and divide net profits 60-40 with B.E. Bradley Evans. The entire relationship had been a calculated business transaction. Every sweet smile, every warm hug, every Mrs. Davis, "You are the mother I never had." It was all a complete fabrication, a Broadway performance, a cold-blooded, Meticulously plotted, long con. Matthew dropped the piece of paper like it was on fire. All the color drained out of his face. She locked onto me like a damn sniper target, like I was just a mark. I was not even a human being to her. I was just a paycheck. I kept digging through the pile. There was a mountain of damning paperwork. A private, legally drafted contract between Caroline and Bradley, signed and notarized 6 months before the wedding day, legally binding them to split the profits from the eventual sale of my home. Thick stacks of printed text messages detailing every step of the psychological warfare. How do we gaslight the old lady? What lies do I feed Matthew today? How do we make the Dubai paperwork look legit? And then I pulled out a document that made my blood run absolute zero. A forged medical diagnosis, printed on the letterhead of a licensed psychiatrist, officially diagnosing Matthew Davis with severe dependent personality disorder and documented patterns of emotional abuse toward his spouse. It was signed by a doctor who, after Matthew did a frantic web search on his phone, turned out to have been stripped of his medical license 3 years ago for peddling fake prescriptions. "This is the nuke she was going to drop if I fought the divorce," Matthew whispered in total horror. She was going to tell a judge I was clinically insane, that I was a violent threat. The manila envelope was stuffed to the brim with photographs. Dozens of glossy surveillance shots snapped by a private investigator. They were not photos of Caroline. They were photos of me. Candid shots of me buying cheap produce at the market, hopping on the city bus, unlocking the deadbolt to my crappy apartment, chatting with Betty and Shirley on the sidewalk. They had been stalking me for months. Scrawled on the back of one photo in Caroline's handwriting was a quick note. "The target is completely isolated. 0 financial resources, 0 legal support system. Represents 0 threat to the timeline. Proceed as planned, 0 threat." That wicked witch had fatally underestimated me. "Mom, there is one more thing." Matthew yanked a final document from the very back of the safe. It was a power of attorney agreement, granting Caroline total, unchecked legal control over every single one of Matthew's bank accounts, assets, and properties. "I never signed this piece of paper," Matthew croaked, his voice cracking. "I have never seen this document in my entire life." "She forged your signature, just like she did with the bank loan. We snapped high-resolution photos of every single page with our smartphones. Every contract, every handwritten note, every fake diagnosis. We meticulously stacked everything back into the safe, exactly the way we found it. We locked the steel door. We wiped down the keypad to make sure we did not leave a single fingerprint behind. And we walked out the front door, armed with a nuclear bomb. The next morning, Mr. Sedative Evan Setter. Miller practically jumped out of his leather desk chair when we slid the printed photos across his desk. "This is absolute gold. This is the smoking gun that buries them for good." He yanked off his glasses and frantically polished the lenses. "This proves premeditated criminal conspiracy, organized fraud, and extortion. We are not just talking about a messy divorce settlement anymore. We are talking about taking down a criminal enterprise." "So what is the play?" I asked. Miller steepled his fingers, a shark-like grin spreading across his face. "We set a trap. A formal sit-down. We lure them in under the guise of negotiating a quiet divorce settlement, and then we drop the entire payload on their heads all at once, right in front of a detective from the fraud division, right in front of witnesses. We corner the rats. I want a front row seat," I demanded, my voice harder than steel. "I want to look her dead in the eyes when she realizes her life is over." Miller chuckled. "Martha, you are not just getting a front row seat. You are going to be the ringmaster of the whole circus." 2 weeks later, the trap was set. We booked a private back room at a neutral, upscale coffee shop downtown. The Lombard Cafe, 2nd floor, huge table by the window. We fired off a text to Caroline from Matthew's phone. "We need to talk, face to face, about finalizing the divorce. I want to settle this quietly. Lombard Cafe, Tuesday, 3 o'clock. Please just show up." Caroline took the bait immediately, shooting back. "It is about time you faced reality. See you there." Tuesday rolled around. Matthew and I got there 30 minutes early. Backing us up was Mr. Miller, Mr. Owens, and a sharp-eyed detective from the Financial Crimes Division named Detective Vance. We took our seats around the massive mahogany table. Stacked neatly in front of us were 3 thick binders packed with explosive evidence. Blown-up prints of the business plan, the motel surveillance shots, the forged contracts, the fake psych evaluation, the whole 9 yards. Right at 3 o'clock on the dot, Caroline waltzed up the stairs. She looked flawless, as usual. A tight black designer dress, red Louboutin heels, a Prada handbag, oversized shades, and a fresh blowout. But the second she reached the top of the stairs and locked eyes with our table, her smug little smile froze dead in its tracks. Because she walked in expecting to find Matthew sitting alone, broken and ready to surrender. Instead, she walked into a firing squad, and sitting dead center at that table, staring a hole right through her with eyes that no longer held an ounce of fear, only pure, unadulterated hellfire, was me. "Hello, Caroline," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Take a seat. We have a lot of ground to cover." Caroline froze at the top of the staircase like a deer in headlights. Her eyes, hidden behind those ridiculous sunglasses, darted wildly across the table. She looked at Matthew, at me, at the 2 lawyers, at the detective, at the thick binders. I could practically see the gears grinding in her head, running the math, desperately looking for an exit strategy, formulating her next lie. Finally, she slid her sunglasses down the bridge of her nose and flashed me that sickening, rehearsed smile I knew so well. "Martha, wow, what a totally unexpected surprise." There was a tiny, almost undetectable quiver in her voice. "I had no idea you were tagging along." "Sit down, Caroline." It was not a polite request. It was a direct order. She hesitated. She glanced back down the stairs, clearly doing the math on making a run for it. But Detective Vance stood up and flashed a shiny gold badge. "Detective Vance, Financial Crimes Division. I highly suggest you pull up a chair, ma'am. This is an official legal proceeding." All the color drained out of Caroline's perfectly contoured face, but she recovered fast. Way too fast. She slid into the chair directly across from us, crossed her legs, and threw up her defensive shield of total arrogance. "I am completely lost here. Matthew texted me saying he wanted to hash out the divorce paperwork." "Oh, we are definitely going to talk about the divorce," Mr. Miller chimed in, flipping open the first heavy binder. "And we are also going to chat about grand larceny, forgery, extortion, and criminal conspiracy. Any of those ring a bell?" Caroline let out a forced, high-pitched laugh. "What on earth are you talking about, Matthew? What kind of sick joke is this? Are you trying to emotionally blackmail me because your fragile ego cannot handle the fact that I am moving on?" Matthew did not say a word. He just stared right through her with a chilling calmness I had never seen in him before. It was my turn at bat. "Caroline, 3 weeks ago, a package was delivered to me." I folded my hands on top of the table, perfectly composed. Inside that package was the gold watch I bought for my son, and a letter. I watched her jaw muscles clench tight. "I have no idea what letter you are talking about, Martha. Matthew has been acting super erratic lately, highly stressed. Honestly, I have been deeply concerned about his mental stability." "His mental stability?" Mr. Owens whipped out the fake psychological evaluation and slapped it down right in the middle of the table. "Are you referring to this completely fabricated medical certificate you bought from a disgraced doctor? The exact same one you plan to use to have him legally committed to a psych ward?" Caroline went ghost white. I have no idea where you got that. We pulled it straight out of your digital safe," I stated casually. "The one bolted into the closet of my master bedroom. Inside my house. Passcode 1508. Her eyes practically popped out of her head. "We also pulled this." Mr. Miller slapped down the blown-up photograph of the handwritten project acquisition, the Davis Estate business plan. Her own handwriting, complete with timestamps, outlining every single malicious strategy. Caroline stared down at the documents. And for the very first time in 5 years, I saw genuine, unmasked terror in her eyes. That is my private property. You broke into my house. That is breaking and entering. My house." I corrected her, my voice dropping 10 degrees. "The deed is still legally tied to my name. Matthew never surrendered it in a divorce settlement because you two are still legally married. And as it turns out, the original sales contract contained a strict lifetime occupancy clause that you blatantly violated. So technically speaking, my dear Caroline, I still own the house. That cannot possibly hold up in court. Caroline stammered, scrambling for words. Oh, it is incredibly legally binding, Mr. Miller interjected smoothly. And we have 3 sworn witnesses on standby who are ready to testify that you aggressively coerced Martha into signing that paperwork using fraudulent promises. That completely voids the original real estate transaction. Mr. Owens flipped open the second binder. And then we have these little gems. He fanned out 53 glossy photographs of Caroline and Bradley Evans caught in wildly compromising positions. He tossed them onto the mahogany table like a dealer dealing a hand of blackjack. Caroline and Bradley making out. Caroline and Bradley wrapped around each other, sneaking out of sleazy motels. One after another. Documented, undeniable adultery, Owens declared with a smug grin. Ironclad grounds for an at-fault divorce. And under state law, when a judge sees blatant, premeditated infidelity, the cheating spouse forfeits their right to any and all community property acquired during the marriage. Caroline violently shoved her chair back and stood up. This is a total setup. Those pictures are completely photoshopped. Sit down, Detective Vance barked, his voice echoing off the walls. Or you will be leaving here in handcuffs for obstruction. Caroline slowly sank back into her chair, her hands shaking violently. And for the grand finale, Mr. Miller said, opening the third and final binder. We have a bank contract. A $45,000 personal loan. He laid the bank paperwork right next to several authentic samples of Matthew's actual signature. The forgery was glaringly obvious. This constitutes felony forgery, bank fraud, and identity theft. These are federal crimes that carry a mandatory sentence of 3 to 12 years in a federal penitentiary. I didn't. Matthew signed that paper. Caroline was completely losing her grip. Her flawless makeup could no longer hide the sheer panic radiating from her face. I never signed that paper, Matthew finally spoke, his voice quiet but absolutely lethal. You forged my name on that dotted line. Just like you forged the power of attorney, just like you forged that fake psych evaluation, just like you forged our entire marriage. You loved me, Caroline shrieked, totally losing her mind. You begged me to marry you. You are only doing this because you are a pathetic loser who cannot stand the fact that I dumped you. No. Matthew leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. You never loved me. I was just a business transaction to you. A target. Project acquisition. The Davis estate. Does that ring a bell? Caroline opened her mouth, but no words came out, and right on cue, the coffee shop door swung open. Bradley Evans strutted up the staircase, radiating that exact brand of cocky arrogance reserved for guys who think they are untouchable. He was rocking a tailored gray 3-piece suit, a flashy Rolex. His hair was slicked back with heavy gel. He flashed his trademark shark grin. Babe, what is the holdup? We have a dinner reservation at. He stopped dead in his tracks when he took in the scene. The cocky grin vanished instantly. Mr. Evans, Detective Vance stood up, adjusting his belt. Perfect timing. We have a few questions we need to ask you. Me? I have no idea what is going on here. I just swung by to pick up your co-conspirator? Owens slid the private contract between Caroline and Bradley across the table, the one legally binding them to a 60-40 split of the profits from selling my stolen house. This contract bears your legal signature, Mr. Evans, right next to your thumbprint. Or are you going to stand there and claim this is Photoshop too? Bradley shot a look at Caroline. Caroline stared back at Bradley, and in that one split second of terrified eye contact, I watched the reality hit them both. They were completely trapped. Bradley spun around, making a move for the stairs. Take one more step, Detective Vance warned, his hand resting on his hip, and I will execute a felony arrest warrant right here, right now. There is already an active criminal complaint filed against you for conspiracy to commit bank fraud. Bradley froze like a statue. Take a seat, Mr. Evans, I commanded, and I shocked myself with the raw authority booming in my own voice. Bradley, the arrogant prick who had laughed in my son's face, who had mockingly called him champ, who had slept in my house like he owned the place, slowly pulled out a chair and sat down. I completely hijacked the room. I stood up. I stared down at the both of them from the head of the table. Caroline Miller, Bradley Evans. For 2 whole years you treated me like a pawn on a chessboard. You manipulated me out of my own home with a web of disgusting lies. You alienated me from my own flesh and blood. You tossed me pennies like a beggar on the street while you popped champagne in my living room. You stalked me like a criminal. You totally underestimated me because you looked at a 67-year-old widow and saw someone too old, too stupid, and too weak to fight back. I slowly walked around the edge of the mahogany table. Caroline refused to even make eye contact with me. But you made one fatal miscalculation. A massive, catastrophic mistake. I stopped right behind their chairs. You went after my son, and there is nothing more dangerous on the face of this earth than an American mother protecting her child. You could hear a pin drop in that coffee shop. Even the baristas downstairs had stopped grinding coffee beans. Now you are going to sit down and listen to exactly how this is going to play out. My voice was calm, ice cold, and totally ruthless. Matthew is filing for an at-fault divorce based on heavily documented adultery. You are not getting a single dime, Caroline. No house, no alimony, no assets. 0. The deed to the house is being transferred back into my name immediately because that fraudulent real estate contract is dead on arrival. I have already consulted with 3 different judges who confirmed my legal standing is bulletproof. You are going to personally pay off every single penny of that $45,000 loan you illegally opened, plus all the accrued interest. And both of you, I pointed a finger directly at Bradley, are going to face federal criminal indictments for bank fraud, identity theft, and criminal conspiracy. Caroline finally broke down into hysterical sobs. But they were not tears of guilt. They were tears of pure, impotent rage. It is not fair. I worked for that house. I earned it. You worked for it? My voice echoed off the walls for the very first time. You worked for it? I poured 30 years of blood, sweat, and tears into that house. My husband and I laid the bricks by hand. I raised my babies inside those walls. I buried my husband and broke my back working overtime just to pay off the mortgage. And you waltzed in with your fake smiles and your sick manipulations and actually thought you could just steal my entire life's work? I leaned down until I was inches from her face. You wanted the whole pie, and now you get absolutely nothing. Bradley tried to stand up, puffing out his chest. This is a complete joke. Let's go, Caroline. You two are not going anywhere until you sign the paperwork, Mr. Miller slapped 2 legal documents down in front of them. Document 1. A legally binding admission of debt regarding the $45,000 fraudulent loan. Document 2. A voluntary, uncontested forfeiture of any and all claims to the property located on Elm Street. You sign these papers right now, or Detective Vance slaps the cuffs on you for felony fraud right here in front of everyone. And what if we tell you to go to hell? Bradley tried to act tough, but his voice was shaking. Detective Vance pulled a pair of heavy steel handcuffs off his belt and slammed them onto the table. Then we all take a nice little ride down to the precinct. And trust me, Mr. Evans, with your rap sheet, no judge in this county is going to grant you bail. Caroline stared down at the documents. She stared at the towering stack of evidence binders. She looked up at my stone-cold face. And she picked up the pen and signed. Bradley signed right after her, muttering vile curses under his breath. One last thing, I said as they threw the pens down. You have exactly 1 week to vacate my property. If I find a single scratch on the hardwood floors, or a single broken window, I will sue you into the Stone Age for property damage. Are we crystal clear? Caroline glared at me with eyes full of pure, toxic hatred. This is not over. You are absolutely right. I flashed her a humorless smile, because the criminal trial has not even started yet. I will see you in federal court, Caroline. They scrambled out of their chairs. Bradley tried to adjust his tie and salvage some dignity, but he just looked like a pathetic loser. Caroline was sobbing hysterically, her expensive mascara running down her cheeks, her perfect illusion totally shattered. As they practically ran out of the coffee shop, Mr. Miller reached across the table and shook my hand. Martha, It was an absolute privilege watching you work. But I barely even heard him, because I looked over at Matthew, and my boy had happy tears streaming down his face. Mom, you actually did it. You really did it. No, honey, we did it. We did it together. We threw our arms around each other right there in the middle of that coffee shop, surrounded by lawyers and binders and sweet, sweet justice. And for the very first time in 2 agonizing years, I felt like I could finally take a deep breath. The legal battle dragged out over 4 grueling months. 4 months where my stomach was tied in constant knots, but I walked around with my head held high. Caroline hired a high-priced defense attorney, a slick guy with a corner office downtown, and a reptile smile who tried to paint me as a bitter, senile old woman spinning wild fairy tales to steal back a house I willingly sold. He tried to get the surveillance photos thrown out. He claimed the documents in the safe were planted by Matthew. He argued that the whole thing was a crazy conspiracy cooked up by a jealous ex-husband who could not handle getting dumped. But all his slick talk could not beat hard evidence. The judge, a tough 60-year-old man who looked like he had heard every lie under the sun, pored over every single contract. He listened to Betty and Shirley take the stand. He listened to grumpy old Arthur rattle off Caroline and Bradley's exact daily schedule. He listened to Mr. Foster, my old attorney, testify under oath that he had strongly advised me against the sale, but that Caroline had aggressively pressured me to close the deal fast, and the judge ruled in our favor, across the board. The divorce was granted strictly on the grounds of documented adultery. Caroline was stripped of any right to the marital assets. The real estate deed transfer was legally voided due to fraudulent coercion and breach of contract. The house was officially put back in my name, but the icing on the cake was the criminal trial. Caroline and Bradley were both indicted for bank fraud. That trial dragged on for another 2 months, but when the dust settled, the gavel came down hard. Bradley got slapped with a 4-year sentence in a state penitentiary. Caroline got hit with 3 years, with a slight chance of early parole only if she paid back every single penny of the forged loan. The day the judge read the sentencing, I did not feel jumping up and down joy. I felt something way deeper than that. Peace, total closure, justice. But the absolute best day of my life was the morning I finally got the keys back to my house. It was a chilly Tuesday in November. The sky was overcast, and it looked like it was going to pour. Matthew and I stood side by side on the front porch. I was clutching the shiny brass keys the court clerk had handed me just an hour earlier. "You ready for this, Mom?" Matthew asked softly. "I am ready." I pushed the heavy oak door open. Caroline and Bradley had been legally evicted a week prior. The court bailiff who supervised the move-out told me that Caroline bawled her eyes out the entire time, that Bradley tried to sneak out with appliances that did not belong to him and had to be threatened with arrest twice, and that they both had to leave in a cheap cab because the bank had repossessed Bradley's flashy BMW. We stepped inside. The house was totally empty, but completely intact. They had hauled out all their gaudy modern furniture, their soulless abstract paintings, their ridiculously overpriced espresso machines, but the bones of the house were untouched. The walls were scrubbed clean. The hardwood floors were swept. The windows were locked tight. It felt like the house had just been sitting there, holding its breath, waiting for me to come home. I walked slowly through every single room. The living room where we hosted countless birthday parties. The dining room where we carved the Thanksgiving turkey. The kitchen where Robert used to sneak up and kiss my neck while I stirred pots on the stove. The master bedroom where we slept side by side for 3 decades. Empty of furniture, but overflowing with love and memories. Matthew found me standing in the kitchen, staring out the window at the backyard garden that had grown into a wild jungle while I was gone. "I am going to fix everything, Mom," he promised. "I swear to you, I am going to make this house look exactly the way it used to." "No," I stopped him, putting a hand on his shoulder. "Not exactly how it used to be. Better." The next 3 months were all about rebuilding, both literally and figuratively. With the restitution money we recovered from the fraud settlement, Caroline was forced to pawn her jewelry and sell her car to pay it back. We bought brand new furniture. Nothing flashy or pretentious, just simple, cozy pieces that made the place feel like a real home again. Betty and Shirley came over to help me pick out warm, inviting curtains. Arthur hobbled across the street, carrying a beautiful potted geranium for my front porch. Matthew hired a local crew, and we painted the walls with bright, cheerful colors. A soft, buttery yellow for the living room, mint green for the kitchen, and a calming sky blue for the bedrooms. I proudly set my wooden cross back up on the corner shelf. I hung dozens of framed family photos all up and down the hallway. I rescued my mother's fine French china out of the dusty storage unit where Caroline had banished it. Step by step, my home started breathing again. But the most beautiful transformation was watching Matthew come back to life. My boy moved back in with me, but this time we set healthy, adult boundaries. He took the guest bedroom down the hall. He respected my privacy. He looped me in on major decisions, but made his own choices. He woke up at the crack of dawn every day. He hit the pavement and landed a solid job in his field. He started seeing a therapist every week to work through the massive trauma of being emotionally abused and gaslighted. "I am never going to let you down again, Mom," he told me one night while we were eating dinner at the kitchen table. I had baked a huge meatloaf, his absolute favorite, and I am never going to let myself down ever again, either. "Honey, everybody stumbles," I told him. "The only thing that matters is that you get back up." 6 months after we won the house back, Matthew landed a great position at a downtown engineering firm. It was not a corner office executive gig, but it was an honest living. He was pulling in a solid salary, and he was incredibly proud of every single dollar he earned through his own hard work. And that is where he met Sarah. Sarah worked in his department. She was a 35-year-old structural engineer. Divorced, no kids. She had a laugh that lit up the entire room and absolutely zero pretentious bone in her body. The very first time he brought her over for dinner, she walked through the door carrying a homemade apple pie she baked herself and flashing a huge, genuine smile. "Martha, Matthew has told me so many wonderful things about you. It is such an honor to finally meet you." I watched her closely while we ate dinner. I watched how she treated Matthew with genuine respect, but never blindly agreed with everything he said. I watched how she asked me questions about my life without being nosy or invasive. I watched how she jumped up to clear the plates and load the dishwasher without me ever asking. After she drove home, Matthew turned to me, looking like a nervous teenager. "So, what is the verdict?" "My verdict is that she has impeccable manners, a beautiful heart, and you look at her in a way I have not seen you look at a woman in a very long time." Matthew broke into a massive grin, and it was the first completely authentic smile I had seen on his face in years. But the story still had one final, unresolved chapter. One chilly afternoon in March, about 8 months after the judge handed down the sentencing, someone knocked on my front door. I pulled it open. It was Caroline. But this was not the picture-perfect, polished Caroline from the Lombard Cafe. This woman had greasy, undyed hair showing harsh gray roots. Zero makeup. She was wearing a cheap, faded sweatshirt from a discount rack and scuffed-up sneakers. She had dark, hollow circles under her eyes. She looked like she had aged 15 years in 8 months. "Martha," her voice was barely a raspy whisper, "can we please talk?" A small part of my brain wanted to slam the heavy oak door right into her nose, but a deeper, wiser part of me knew that this confrontation had to happen. "You can talk from right there on the porch. You are not stepping 1 foot inside this house." Caroline nodded weakly. Her eyes instantly filled with tears. "I came here to beg for your forgiveness." I just stood there, staring at her in total silence. "I am so sorry for everything. For manipulating you, for stealing your home, for completely destroying Matthew, for—" her voice cracked and broke, "for acting like an absolute monster." And I did not let a single ounce of emotion leak into my expression. "I lost everything, Martha. Bradley is rotting in a cell, and he stuck me with a mountain of legal debt. I am sleeping on a leaky air mattress in my sister's cramped basement. I mop floors in a corporate office building on the night shift just to survive. I barely have enough cash to buy groceries." I kept staring in total silence. I just need to hear you say you forgive me, so I can finally move on with my life." I looked her dead in the eyes and handed her the absolute truth. "Caroline, you do not need my forgiveness to move on with your life. What you need is to figure out how to live with the devastating consequences of your own psychotic choices. But You coldly and clinically plotted to rip a family apart, not because you were desperate or starving, because you were a greedy, entitled parasite. You wanted to play God and you used human beings as stepping stones. And now that you rolled the dice and lost everything, you crawl back here begging for absolution, acting like a little pat on the head is going to magically erase all the trauma you caused. Tears were streaming down Caroline's cheeks, dripping onto her cheap sweatshirt. I am absolutely never going to forgive you, Caroline. Because real forgiveness is a gift, and gifts are reserved for people who actually deserve them. You do not deserve a damn thing. Martha, please, I am begging you, but I am not going to waste energy hating you, either. Because holding on to hatred would just make me your prisoner all over again. I am simply going to forget you ever existed. And that, Caroline, is a punishment way worse than any insult I could hurl at you right now. I shut the heavy oak door in her face, locked the deadbolt, and I never saw that woman again for the rest of my life. A full year after the gavel dropped at the trial, I woke up in my own bed, exactly like I did every single morning. But this specific day was special. It was a Saturday, and Saturdays meant something incredibly beautiful in this house now. I pushed the covers back, slipped on my plush lavender bathrobe, the one I treated myself to with my very first full Social Security check that I did not have to blow on rent, and padded barefoot through my house. The bright morning sun was streaming through the bay windows I had picked out myself. The rich, bold aroma of fresh ground coffee floated through the air because Matthew had finally learned how to brew it exactly the way I taught him. I walked into the kitchen and found my son and Sarah bustling around cooking breakfast. They had spent the night in the guest room because they made it a point to come stay with me every single weekend. Sarah was furiously whisking eggs in a glass bowl. Matthew was chopping up fresh tomatoes and jalapenos. "Good morning, Martha." Sarah walked over and gave me a warm kiss on the cheek. She did not call me Mrs. Davis's with that stiff, calculated formality Caroline used in the beginning. It sounded totally natural and full of genuine love. "Good morning, sweetheart." And it hit me right then. I could call her sweetheart without feeling that sickening knot twisting in my stomach like I did with Caroline. Because this incredible woman did not walk into our lives looking to see what she could extract from us. She walked in looking to see what joy she could add. We all sat down and ate breakfast together at the big oak dining table. The exact same table I rescued from the dusty storage unit. Matthew excitedly babbled about a huge new architectural project his firm had just handed him. Sarah pulled up photos on her phone of a gorgeous cabin they were planning to rent up in the mountains, insisting that I pack a bag and tag along. "You definitely need to get out and see the world, Martha. Life is too short to just bounce between work and the house." She smiled. "Maybe you are right, sweetheart. Maybe I will take you up on that." After we finished our plates, Betty and Shirley strolled through the front door. They had a standing invitation to come over for Saturday morning coffee and gossip. Arthur hobbled over across the street a few minutes later, clutching a fresh pot of blooming petunias for my front porch. "Just to keep the yard looking sharp, Martha," he chuckled, flashing a toothless grin. We all migrated into the living room, the exact same living room where, 2 years ago, Caroline sat on my couch plotting to destroy my entire existence. Now, the room was bursting with loud laughter, steaming mugs of coffee, fresh donuts from the local bakery, and the beautiful noise of people who loved me unconditionally without wanting a single thing in return. "Did you hear the latest about Caroline?" Betty whispered loudly, because Betty always had the neighborhood tea. "No, and honestly, I do not care to know." "Well, the rumor mill says she is still scrubbing toilets downtown. Bradley got out of lockup early on good behavior, but she totally ghosted him. Word is, she is living out of a tiny, beat-up studio apartment on the bad side of town." Shirley clicked her tongue against her teeth. "Greed always comes back to bite you, Martha. She tried to steal the whole pie and ended up starving." "Exactly," I said, taking a long sip of my hot coffee. "And that is the greatest life lesson she could have possibly learned." Arthur raised his ceramic coffee mug in the air. A toast to poetic justice. We all clinked our mugs together. That afternoon, after everyone had hugged me goodbye and the house settled into a peaceful quiet, I stepped out into the backyard. The garden that had turned into an overgrown jungle during my exile was now totally blooming back to life. Roses, carnations, fresh mint. Rosemary, every single plant tended to with love and care. I sat down on the wooden bench Robert had built with his own 2 hands 30 years ago. I ran my fingers over the weathered wood. I closed my eyes. And I just let myself remember. I remembered the sheer terror I felt the morning I opened that cardboard box at the farmer's market. I remembered the sickening panic of reading Matthew's confession letter. I remembered the white-hot rage burning in my chest when I realized the scope of their lies. I remembered every single tear I shed, every sleepless night staring at a water-stained ceiling, every single dollar I counted just to afford a can of beans. But I also remembered something else. I remembered that when I hit rock bottom, when I was rotting in a freezing apartment with barely a few $100 to my name, when I truly believed my only son was living a luxury life halfway across the globe, when I felt more isolated and abandoned than I ever had in my entire life, I still refused to roll over and die. I could have easily played the victim. I could have accepted the pathetic crumbs Caroline tossed my way and just quietly faded into the background. But I chose to step into the ring and fight back. And that single choice changed the trajectory of my entire life. Matthew walked out the back door and sat down on the bench right beside me. "What is going through that head of yours, Mom?" "Just thinking about how incredibly grateful I am." "Grateful? After the absolute hell we just walked through?" "Grateful, Matthew. Because surviving that living nightmare taught me exactly who I am at my core." I turned and looked him dead in the eyes. It taught me that a 67-year-old widow can go toe-to-toe with a manipulative sociopath half her age and win. It taught me that your personal dignity is never up for sale, no matter the price tag. It taught me that genuine, authentic love looks absolutely nothing like the toxic poison she was serving. Matthew reached out and grabbed my hand. And it taught me that staying quiet makes you an accomplice. It taught me that being a coward carries a massive, devastating price tag, and that it is never, ever too late to stand up and do the right thing. We sat there together in total silence, watching the orange sun dip below the horizon over my backyard, over my home, over my beautifully reclaimed life. That night, right before I crawled into bed, I pulled out Matthew's confession letter, the one that came inside the cardboard box. I read it over one final time, and then I folded it up and locked it away in a small wooden box right next to his gold watch. Not to torture myself with the painful memories, but to remind myself of the choice I made, because I learned an absolutely priceless lesson over those 2 grueling years. True wealth has absolutely nothing to do with the square footage of the house you own. It is about the personal dignity you refuse to let anyone strip away from you. It is not about the digits sitting in your savings account. It is about the genuine, unbreakable bonds you build with the people who matter. Winning is not just about crushing your enemies. It is about finding the grit to stand back up every single time life knocks you flat on your back. Caroline wanted it all. The luxury house, the fat bank accounts, the absolute power, the total control. And she walked away with absolute zero. Because material possessions can vanish in the blink of an eye. But self-respect? That is bulletproof. I lost my home for 2 agonizing years, but I gained back things that are infinitely more valuable. I got my son back. I found my inner warrior. I reclaimed my voice. And if you asked me to choose between the Martha from 3 years ago, the woman who lived a quiet, untested life in her suburban house, and the Martha sitting here right now, the woman who went to war, took the hits, fought back tooth and nail, and emerged victorious, I would pick this Martha every single day of the week. Because now I know exactly what kind of steel I am made of. And absolutely nobody can ever take that away from me. If this story touched your heart, if it made you feel something real, if it reminded you that it is never too late to stand up and fight for your dignity, please drop a comment down below and tell me what life lesson you are taking away from this. Hit that like button if you truly believe that a mother's love is the most unstoppable force on the planet. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so we can keep sharing incredible, real-life stories just like this one. And hey, let me know down in the comments where in the world are you watching from. I absolutely love seeing how far these stories travel and knowing they are connecting with hearts all across the globe. Because at the end of the day, every single one of us has something worth fighting for. And we all deserve the justice we are seeking. Just remember, true victory is not just about destroying the person who broke your heart, It is about rebuilding yourself into something far stronger than you ever were before. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. I will see you all in the very next confession.